Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and this is the concluding lecture in the identity series. I'm hoping it doesn't go too long, so if it goes way too long, then maybe it'll be the first half of the concluding lecture. But I think I can get it, sneak in all the rest of it. But we've been going on for a while, so I thought it'd be good to kind of wrap it up. And I want to do identity politics. I was prompted to think about doing a lecture on identity because I find the whole concept of identity politics so fascinating, but it's a kind of controversial, clickbaity kind of field. And I didn't want to do that. So I figure if you've had the patience to listen to several hours worth of ramblings about identity and the philosophical background and the cultural underpinnings or lack thereof, then I don't want to do something controversial. I just really want to think about it. And, I'm not trying to stir up, pros and cons and all this kinds of nonsense that I find very unhelpful. So rather than start there, I figured let's end there because I do think it's illustrative of many of the issues that have been covered so far. And what I find particularly fascinating about it is it's correct. I feel like identity politics have the right problem, identity. They have accurately put their finger on, right, one of the core problems that our society faces. We're wealthier than people have ever been. Our lives are longer. We have more opportunity. We, on paper, so much of what about our lives are so spectacularly, phenomenally wonderful compared to any historical measure whatsoever. Then people go, but why are people so upset? And of course, one argument is, well, people are just stupid. They shouldn't be upset. Look, they're so rich. They shouldn't be upset. This has relatively little merit. I mean, it's true that we have lots of material goods. We live longer. But what's been undermined, which is, again, what I started with from the very beginning, is our core biological, evolutionary, cultural need to have a sense of belonging, a sense of identity. And that identity comes from both ourselves and ourselves in relationships to our communities. And so what is one of the big problems that the modern world has created for us? It's undermined one of the core and necessary ingredients for a healthy, fulfilling life in all of the ways that we've discussed. And so when people go identity politics, you would be like, right, the politics that are finally trying to address. We've had the politics of poverty when we were not done with poverty, but we've made a lot of progress with that. Why? Because we've embraced the notion that poverty is a political issue rather than just something that, the gods have deemed as necessary. You have a bunch of poor people. That's just the way the world is. You don't think about it. Eventually it became a political issue, a social issue where you say, hey, no, poverty is the product of a society and a society is a product of our politics. So let's get the politics right so that we can start addressing poverty, which seems like perfectly reasonable. It takes time, of course, but we've been working on this and making, unbelievable progress by all historical standards. Think of healthcare. Healthcare used to be A, non-existent, and then B, it was if you could afford it, you could have it. And then slowly we've been evolving over the last 100 years or so, actually more than that, several hundred years. Middle Ages, they had hospitals. The Islamic world, by the way, if you're interested in Islamic cultural and philosophical history, they were very early on the notion of social responsibility for things like hospitals, insane asylums. These sorts of things are more core in some ways to the early Islamic civilization. So it's one of the fascinating elements of the evolution of their particular cultural outlook. So, but that politics of that evolved, right? Like, oh no, there needs to be a means of addressing the need for medical care. And that's like a core human assumption. This is a political idea. This is a cultural expectation. Well, identity is rolling around. So on one hand, yay, the idea that we need a politics that starts addressing concepts of identity seems quite right to me. On the other hand, of course, after that, it goes rapidly downhill. And for all the reasons that we've been talking about, yeah. So one way, not the only way, but one way to think about this is that the identity politics is generally either too big or too small. So it kind of vacillates if you listen to it or pay any attention to it, which I recommend not doing. But so everybody wants to belong to a larger group. But the problem is, again, we're biologically, culturally happiest with small groups. We want to identify and feel identity with small groups. That's what gives us fulfillment. Turns out that, again, all the famous people and who say, oh, I became famous and I thought that would make me happy because millions of people knew who I was and I was even more miserable. Yes, because while it's reasonable to expect that might help, it turns out it doesn't, because this is actually counterproductive for the sorts of sense of identity that we need to be healthy and feel fulfilled. So if you think of all the identity groups that we're supposed to be associated with, it's always too big. So let's say I decide that I want to have an identity. I feel uncertain. I feel threatened. The world feels insecure to me, again, for all the reasons that we've discussed, which is, you're not wrong, right? You probably should feel this way given the way our society deals with us. And so I go, oh, I'm going to be a white supremacist. Yay, this is a great idea, right? Let's be white supremacists. And go, okay, I'm going to drive as my identity. Again, notice how wrong this is. Wrong on so many levels. One, on whiteness, which is an abstract concept. It feels concrete. Says, oh, we kind of know who white people are, but it turns out we kind of also don't know who white people are. So are Spanish people white people? They're Europeans. And you can just go on. The race generally is just a horrible way to start. But even if you buy that, you go, okay, now here's the other problem is, it's too big of a group. Having a million people that you identify with is not very much different from having nobody you identify with. This is roughly the equivalent, because that's just too abstract. And so what happens is, when they study these white supremacist groups, is really they're small, lots and lots of very small groups of people who have decided to build an identity around this sort of bizarro notion that white people or white heritage or something is better than everybody else's, and therefore, yay. But they buy in because there's a few people. It's a niche. It's like a niche cultural phenomenon. It's been weird that it's sort of exploded on one hand in the press and in the news. But if you look, like, the rallies are attracting 200 people, and you go, wow, it's kind of impressive if your country is filled with millions and millions of theoretically white people, and you can only get 50 or 60 of them, or 100 or 200 to march. I find that very, very reassuring. That's so few. Like, yay! I always expected there to be more crazy people than that. So, so it's because it's very small scale politics that they actually want. They want a few friends who reinforce them, and for whatever reason, it turns out that the white supremacy rabbit hole is the one they decided to go down. Same thing for all of this. In fact, all the racial identifications, like being African American. If you say, oh, you should identify with your race, right? They're always trying to find who's the spokesperson for the African Americans. Well, this is just the dumbest question of identity. You can't have a spokesman for tens of millions of people. Not one person is going to stand up and say, well, they all agree with me, right? So we're all the same, because basically, all us black folk, we're the same. And therefore, if I talk, basically it's as if all of us are talking, which is, of course, it's racist, number one. It's like definitionally racist. And two, the notion that there isn't this incredible diversity of capacity and abilities, and everything else is, it's just racist. But that idea is, the culture wants to be able to point to that, to the person, to the thing, because then it solidifies identity. The interesting thing with African Americans, of course, however, is they really don't have a choice, because our culture so strongly presses that way, right? That there's a huge culture saying, no, this is who you are. This is how you must be. You have to have a spokesman who speaks for everybody, even though, of course, it's remarkable. So in that case, identity, like I mentioned last time, identity is almost enforced upon them, which is also, of course, not that helpful. And so trying to form these huge groups of any kind, again, just all of the one example, move off the racism thing, is the people, again, who are always trying to find their ancestry, right? And to get a sense of identity. That's why it's such a huge multi-billion-dollar industry. I mean, the science of it is just right up there with getting your horoscope read. So notice this is they are absolutely as scientifically true and accurate and helpful as a horoscope. But B, what do people find out? Oh, I'm 40% Italian. So what is that? So then people have an Italian identity. So what does this mean? So there's like as if Italians are all exactly the same, of course, as if there is a place called Italy. I mean, Italy is a very new cultural phenomenon. Like, even as a nation, it hasn't been around that long, and the borders have moved a lot, and But anyway, let's just assume Italy exists and has existed for all time, or for at least a few thousand years. Not true, of course. But what it means is, if I'm going to derive my identity this way, is I have an idea of what I think Italian people are like. The unhelpful abstraction. I'm 40% Italian, which based on some astrological charts that they threw at the genetic study center there. Therefore, I must be pretty much like I imagine people are like in Italy, and therefore this imaginary relationship to an abstraction helps give me a sense of belonging. Whew. So on one hand, apparently it does work because it's a multi-billion-dollar industry, so this sort of flies, but you can see this is not going to be a really that good of a solution. It's not, because again, you're just piling up abstractions and hoping and filling like magical places in your mind with theories about how you must be given this genetic relationship that probably isn't accurate in any case. So that's not a very good approach. But also highlights sort of the other side. So on one hand, we tend to try to appeal to groups that are too large. A race or a sex, half the population of the world, right? Oh, I'm a woman or I'm a man. That tells me who I am. Yeah, okay, now you've narrowed it down to what, 3.5 billion people? So you're fundamentally like 3.5 billion people. Even if that were true, which of course is silly, it would be unhelpful, right? That's not a helpful narrower of a sense of who you might be. So yeah, there's this, but the flip side, like with I want to find out who I am genetically, this is too small. Again, we move way back from that and we go, okay, forget all these big groups. I realize this is a problem, so I want to know who I am. And you have all this help and all this suggestions and all these online things and books that always say, go inside. Stoicism, by the way, is big on this. Go inside, find yourself and truth. Part of this is accurate, so I don't want to just, throw that out. Part of this is true. Stoicism has lots of things to say, but the problem is we're social animals. We're not meant to be alone. We're not designed, wrong word. We did not evolve, and our cultural training and history and background does not allow us to thrive, again, as isolated individuals. And we need community. We're communal animals. And that is what allows us to grow and thrive. And so if I just try and isolate myself and pull in on myself and say, I am sufficient unto myself, well, yeah, it turns out you're wrong. Maybe a very few people, but even that's not true. You cannot thrive on your own in isolation, basically. Those are the rules. Like, for instance, I think I mentioned this earlier in the lecture series. If children are not exposed to language when they're quite young, they never develop, basically it damages their brains. So they'll never acquire language. So if you have language, you can thank socialization. I mean, that's how fundamental it is to the human experience. You need socialization to develop language skills. And if you have socialization, you will develop language skills. It works both ways. Even if there's been these cases where, young children in orphanages or because of other war tragedy, usually they get isolated in groups. And all the adults go away, and there's just some 9 and 10-year-old kids and a bunch of really young kids, much younger even than that. No problem. Language, they have other problems, but the language development, not a problem. If left to their own devices, even if they don't have much of language training before, they'll just develop their own language. They'll just develop a patois, and they'll be off and rolling, no problem. So just the fact that we have language is demonstrates the depth to which biologically to be healthy, we need to have other humans around to interact with, because if we don't, our brains are damaged. They will not develop fully. It's not even clear, you might even not perhaps be counted as fully human. Perhaps you could even think of it that way. That's how crucial socialization is to our existence. And so if you try to just roll everything back and just be on your own, be in yourself, this is not good enough either. And one model that tries to address both directions of this, by the way, I should follow on there, but you do see a lot of cultural impulses towards that. They say, make your own way, be rich, make yourself wealthy, right? You've got to be focused on you. You're the most important thing. If you're not fighting to get ahead, then, other people aren't fighting for you. It's all this, it's a dog eat dog world out there. It's, we have this huge, particularly in the United States, there's a huge insistence on the individual making their own way in the world and fighting their way to the top, and all this nonsense, none of which is accurate or true, because individuals do not do anything. It's impossible within our society for individuals to function outside. I mean, like electricity, language. I mean, just everything. We're already so invested and helped by and surrounded by community and the benefits of community, that to even think of individuals in the sense in which we often do in the media and popular books is simply it's a serious distortion that misleads people. And so they think, oh, if I make my way, I'm successful, I get to the top, I'm a person, then what happens? Well, there you are. You're on your own. You're an unhappy monkey. You're an unhappy monkey because monkeys need other monkeys around. And other cultures, particularly if we look at China and something like Confucianism. By the way, I should make a note. I've been talking about Confucianism in China. The Chinese cultural and philosophical history is, of course, spectacularly complex and huge. And there's so many different strands, monism and legalism and Mencius, who I mentioned before, Confucianism, Taoism, Buddhism comes in and goes out. It's the neo Confucianism. There's been several writings and redevelopments of this. So it just goes on and on and on. So the notion that China equals Confucianism, no, much more complicated than that. But one of the big cultural things that was invested in Confucianism that did play out and has had huge influence in China is the centrality of the family. And what Confucius looked at this problem because he lived at a very troubled time, an unsettled time. And he says, well, that gives people a sense of order, of belonging, and of peace, which is all good things. And he said, well, the core of this has to be the family, right? You have to look at it and go, the family. And so he used the family not just as family relations as the crucial driver, but family as a model for all other relations. So the state should be run like a family. Your family should be run like a family. And friends. There's also a heavy emphasis on friends. Now, this is a great solution on one hand because families are sort of necessary. We have to have families. And it does give people the right scale. So remember, and also think large sense of family. Aunts, uncles, grandparents, nephews, nieces, cousins. So we're not talking a family of 4 or 5. We're talking a family of 100 or 50 or 40, right? A much larger scale with serious connections. In Confucianism, they take these connections seriously. Your cousin is a person. Your cousin matters because they're your cousin. This is not a small thing. These sorts of larger family connections really drive their sense of identity, belonging, responsibility, and has helped it. Well, it's shown that for thousands of years, it's been a functioning central concept for how to build a society and provide people with a sense of belonging and identity. It turns out it works at some level. Where it falls apart, particularly within the context of the modern world, is your family is not elective. So it requires submission to a non-voluntary set of associations. Within this association, of course, you can have a lot of, well, I like these relatives a lot more than those relatives. So it's not, it's not a prison. It's not this incredibly, tightly controlled, but fundamentally it is a non-voluntary set of strictures and runs very counter to the notion of individual freedom, which we talked about earlier. But of course, individual freedom is precisely the development that undermines a sense of identity that Confucianism is so worried about making sure is not undermined because it leads to disorder and unhappiness. So you can see that the tight relationship of these sorts of, as a slider, right, where individual liberty really does undermine the sense of identity, particularly in the traditional systems provided by things like Confucianism, where you see in either the Hindu social systems and even in the Islamic world, particularly Islamic world during the Classic Age. But again, the oppressive nature of required family responsibilities, that overwhelming burden that's placed on you impersonally. It has nothing to do with you. So we have the problem of the too big, we have the problem of the too small, and we have the problem of the sort of correctly sized but not really voluntary, that this is something we're forced into. And how do you negotiate these three things? Well, one way is to just look back at the history and say, it's a word I kind of, or a phrase I like, but not too much. So it's something like elective tribe, where now you have the responsibility, that's the elective part, of selecting the people you want in your tribe. The tribe word, I struggle with the tribe word. I don't come up with a better one. Maybe I'll try to think a little more about that. But of course, tribalism, suggests, the primitives and all this. And it's that early cultures were small scale. And so the word tribal, it just means, in theory, it just means small scale community. Of course, it carries all this other baggage that, tribalism and return to the past and all, everything was great in the Stone Age, these sorts of concepts. But it is this notion of a small group of people that you select to be a part of your life, and you're going to be part of their lives. This pretty much needs to be mutual. And then the rest of the world is just the rest of the world. And that is a huge challenge, but probably about the only way of addressing this without giving up so much of your elective freedoms. Now, if you want to give up your elective freedoms, it's no problem. Then you just sign up with a fundamentalist religion. I think this is why people really like fundamentalist religions. They're popular because they solve a lot of these problems. All you have to do is just give up yourself, and then you're good to go. Right? I'll just do what they say. They'll tell me I'm a good person. I get lots of positive feedback. I have a group of people I can be with. In fact, for some reason, I do not understand why everybody isn't a member of a fundamentalist religion. But that drive towards personal emancipation says, now, wait a second. I don't want somebody else telling me the rules. I don't want somebody else defining who I should be with, who I can marry, where I can live, all these other questions. But we do have to answer those questions. And the one way, perhaps a necessary way of beginning to answer them, is this notion of elective tribe, of saying, okay, I have to resort my world and make it comprised of people whom feed me, help me, and whom I help and feed and support, right? And that reciprocal nature of it is very difficult to achieve, but I think necessary. I think this is what we're kind of starting to figure out culturally, that we're not good at it yet, because historically all of our associations were prescribed. We had to do it. We have no choice. You couldn't talk to those people. You could talk to those people. There are a few people you might talk to if nobody was watching, and there you go. Here's your family. Those are your obligations to your family, generally legal, by the way, not like, we just press you culturally. No, they're legal. If you didn't do them, they could throw you in jail. Who are you going to marry? History is filled with all these, unhappy relationships because two people want to get married, and one father will put the daughter into a nunnery and just say you have to be there, and the other father puts the son, ships him off on a ship to Madagascar and says, no, you're in the trade because we don't approve of this marriage, so you're gone. Boom. So not a lot of choice there, right? You're not a lot of liberty to decide who you want to love and who you want to hang out with. So expanding that seems all to the good, but now how do you do it? What we've been doing is emphasizing both the too small and the too big. And I think people are discovering that, wow, it really does not help me just to get what I want for me. I do need a sense of the larger. And then people say, you need a sense of mission and, commit money to this or, work for that. And I'm like, yeah, but all those things tend to be, again, abstractions. So back to the example where the kid is drowning in the pond, and will you go save the kid even though you've got nice shoes on? And of course, yes, you will. The answer is yes, you will. So good for you. That's what you will do because you're a decent human being, and almost everybody is. Statistically, very, very, very few people will not do that. But then of course the extension was, why then won't you send money off to save starving children someplace else? And it's like, because those other children are an abstraction. And that is a huge problem. And then the argument is, well, you should do that. Well, it turns out that really what's much more healthy is to find some kids in your neighborhood, if you want to help kids, and help them, right? Why is it kid in a pond or kids, I don't know, 5,000 miles away? Why can't it be some other kids in my neighborhood? Why can't I just help them, right? Make them lunch, walk them to school, pay for their college tuition. And that scale seems to be, we really look down on it as far as I can tell. The notion of saying, oh, these are my friends and I take care of them and they take care of me and that's fine. And the rest of the world, I don't know. What am I supposed to do? I'm not in charge of the rest of the world, which you aren't probably. If you are, please send me an email. I have some comments, but probably we're not in charge of the rest of the world. And so, yeah, just let go, right? That's that notion of saying, wow, you should be responsible for abstractions is, of course, crazy because you can't be. It's not possible. We're humans. We're limited. But it doesn't mean we can't do anything. It turns out we're very much happier if we do things where we get direct feedback. We like direct feedback. That's basically how it boils down to. So that if you do something that's scaled to your environment, your community, the people that you know, then you tend to feel good about it. But it's very weird how resistant, again, our culture is. So I was trying to ponder examples of this, but if you pay for your own children to go to college, everybody goes, oh, okay, if you have the money, that seems reasonable. If you paid for somebody else's kids to go to college, that would be, I'm sure it happens, but it's not that common. But people do donate to their alma maters all the time because they feel like they have a connection to their school. And of course, they send you mails in your mailbox and all this. But, is that as good? Wouldn't it be better if instead of just donating to schools, people donated to individual kids? I mean, and some people do this, by the way. Some, business people have gone into their neighborhoods where they came from or where they still live and just gone to the high school and said, okay, everybody's going to college. I'm going to pay for it. No worries. That seems like very human scaled. You can know these people. You can follow them. You can help them. They can help you. It's a communal sensibility. This is, I think, one of the problems that we have with taxes, right, is we pay taxes for all this stuff, but it's so big and vast that we go, oh, well, they take some money and it goes away and then stuff happens around me, but I just can't make the connection. People are always like, well, why do I have to pay taxes? And it's like, well, because we drive on roads, right? Roads seem okay, with electricity. Electricity is cool. So, we have all these systems that are supported by taxes. Probably wouldn't spend quite as much on nuclear weapons if it were up to me. But, this is part of the grand imperfect bargain. But it's not a very satisfying bargain because the scale is so inhuman. And but we're suspicious of small scale issues, of smaller, more immediate. So just example, some students that I had at the college, this is about 8 years ago, they were graduating, and one of them got into, I don't remember the school. Anyway, one of them got into a really good school, and the other three got into, by the way, in quotes, would be a really good school. And then the other three got into a fine school. And so they just said, well, one guy said, well, I'm not going. I'm going to go with these. I would rather go to a lesser school, which is, of course, a dubious ranking, but a lesser school and be with my friend. And it became like an issue of controversy amongst the parents. Like, oh, well, you shouldn't give up the opportunity and no, all this. And I'm like, wow, what a strange notion. That wouldn't it be better to be with your friends if they are your friends, and they seemed like they really were their friends, than to pursue some individual isolated goal amongst strangers? And our culture says unhesitatingly, no, pursue the isolated goal amongst strangers. That's going to be the best for you. And it's not that traveling or going places and experiencing new things isn't actually sort of opening and expand your world and bringing you challenges, but it turns out that what we really like is to do all that with people we know. That's what we like to do. That's what's healthier for us. And so, but communally, the sense of the families were like very suspicious about this. Like, hey, you can't do that because why not? Why wouldn't we actually think the other way around? Oh, that's great. What a great idea. Wouldn't it have been great, to have friends where you go and you know them and you develop and then you carry that through your life. And hey, what a wonderful thing. What a beautiful part of your life to have. And again, all of the evidence, besides just being an interesting philosophical or ethical concept, all the evidence is this is what makes you healthy. It is the single most important element in your health, physical health, not to mention psychological health, but your mental and physical health is best served when you're in a community. Small can be a small group that makes you feel like you have a sense of purpose and identity. If you do not have that, your health, generally speaking, is very, very much worse. But again, think of careers or jobs. The number one thing, you can look at all the studies online, they all show the same thing. People like to work at jobs where they like the people they work with. And people don't like to work at jobs where they don't like the people they work with. All of the other elements of a job turn out to be secondary, and like work environment, pay, compensation, feeling like you're doing something valuable and meaningful. All of those things turn out to be important. Not to say they do not matter to people. They do matter to people. But what people, when they report job satisfaction, is because they're like, oh, why do you like where you work? Oh, I work with great people. If they work with great people, it turns out that all the other things on the list don't matter. If people say, oh, I hate where I work, they say, why? It's usually number one, I don't like the people I work with. Don't like the work environment. Don't like the people I work with. There you go. So if you're thinking about a job or a career, you should think about what kind of job or career can I get where I work with people, the kind of people I like. But I've actually never seen this listed. I've seen all the conversation about, creating a healthy work environment where people enjoy, liking people. But they always say, what kind of career, you should get a field in STEM, or, this is the kind of earnings you can expect, and this is the career opportunities, and it's all wrong-headed. They should be saying, well, what kind of people do you want to hang out with? What kind of people do you want to spend your day with? And where do those kind of people work? It's a perfectly reasonable question. And I don't even think it's that difficult to answer. We just don't ask it. We don't organize our conceptual apparatus for thinking about a job or a career around that, around the notion of what kind of people do I enjoy being around. And generally speaking, it's hard to tell, I would say, exactly what kind of people we like, but I don't think it's that hard. I think you can narrow it down. If you hang out at a law firm, if you hang out at a nice restaurant, if you hang out at a great landscaping place, you'll get a different sense of the people and the kinds of people that are around, and the kinds of people that are happy there. And you go, ooh, I like these people. They seem to be doing an interesting thing in a happy way. Or I don't like these people. This area, this career, this company tends to be attracting the kinds of people that I don't like. I think I'll avoid this. And it could be that in a career field, you could find different career fields, of course, will be different. But, do you want to be spending a lot of time with those kinds of people in these kinds of environments? If yes, great. I mean, your chances of meeting the kinds of people you like and enjoy go way up, and then your life satisfaction and happiness go way up. And this turns out to be irrelevant of things like pay. That just doesn't seem to matter. Even job prestige seems to be really way much lower than how much you enjoy spending the time you are with the people that you have to spend, obviously, or often, so much time with. I was thinking about this, again, when I think about these lectures, I have everything sort of run through this filter as I'm thinking about it. And there's been all this stuff in the news about Amazon drivers and the abusive environment. And I thought, I wonder if they'd be just happier if they could just ride along with somebody they liked, right? Instead of having one person in a truck, if they could have somewhere where people got to select, right? They'd make a team. And I'm just wondering if you could work out the math, and I bet the productivity and the general employee happiness and the reduction in turnover and all of the other elements and theft and damage and random crashing of trucks and, whatever. I wonder if that would go down enough to make up the small difference in cost of having a second person ride along. if there was some method of people being able to go, oh yeah, this is a person I like, I can work with them. I mean, and then people be going, oh yeah, I got to go work. Oh yeah, I'm going to hang out with my buddy Sheila. She's great, and we go and we deliver and we have fun. We listen to the radio and we chat and we play cards at lunchtime, whatever. Right? That somehow some sense of like, oh yeah, this is all right, and all of a sudden it might become an attractive job, as opposed to a job where they're like, oh, they get good compensation and this, but yeah, it's a miserable, a lot of work, and that just seems to rarely manifest itself, rarely show up as a sort of concept of improving the interpersonal dynamic. It's almost as if it's rude, like that's nothing. The company should have nothing to do with that. Like corporations or businesses, or you're not supposed to ever even take that into account. People show up when they clock in, they're on the clock, and it's not about individuality anymore. It's about productivity and numbers and blah, blah, blah. But of course, that's all nonsense. And everybody knows that good work cultures produce good work results. So, but but we just, again, think of it in larger and larger terms. How much should you do for your friends? Always a big question, right? What is there's, again, if you read in the Islamic world, there's lots of great stories about this, where like, oh, my friend was in trouble, so I sold myself into slavery so that he could buy his way out of trouble, whatever the problem that he was in. And that people are like, well, that's crazy. You can't do that. And it's like, why not? Right? What's the limits? Like, where does, and because we emphasize individuality, we think, oh, that's crazy. You can't do something like that because that sacrifices yourself for somebody else. And we always think of this in terms of sacrifice. But instead, if we thought of it, oh, this is an investment in community. I mean, investment in community. I don't even like that kind of language. But if we to try and change our thinking and to say, rather than this is a sacrifice, no, this is great. This is community building. This is making sure I'm in an environment that makes me happy, healthy, and contributes to my mental and psychological well-being. Then maybe people would go, oh, okay, well, you can do things for your friends. You can do things to build community. But again, I'm just always shocked at how consistently suspicious we are of any sort of significant investment that people, might make like that, where they go, oh yeah, no, I have a place, we built a place in our property so our buddy could live there. And they're like, well, does he pay rent? And if people say, well, no, that's not, he mows the lawn or something every once in a while. But yeah, it's just, people are like, well, shouldn't he pay rent? It's like, what if he's a pleasure to have around? What if she's a positive contribution to your life? Why would you want to charge for that? But well, you're a valuable asset. And I've heard these conversations for years, and people just cannot figure it out. But the problem is they also can't figure out why they're so unhappy and miserable. And it's because if you do all these calculations based on you as an individual and think you thrive only by feeding yourself, then yeah, you're doomed. It's not going to work. And so this is where we find ourselves here in 2021, where our civilization and our society and modernism has thrown us essentially to the wolves by fundamentally undermining a core and necessary element for human health and well-being. And so you see widespread dissatisfaction. You see it all over the place. It manifests itself, I'm sure it's all perfectly clear to everybody. It manifests itself in so many different ways, but the fundamental driver is precisely the same. It is this, the stripping away of all the grounds in which we used to rely for building a sense of identity, which is necessary for our well-being again. And yet we have not really yet found a good replacement for it. We're struggling there culturally and perhaps individually. And so trying to rethink this, the too big does not help. I'm a member of a nation. I'm a member of a large religion. I'm a member of a race. I'm all these vast structures which function. Anything that big just is an abstraction because we can't process it in any kind of personal, physical way. It's not possible for us to do that. So it just becomes an abstraction, and then abstractions aren't going to help us that much. And or we then shift to the individual. Oh, if I have an investment, if I do something that makes me rich, or a great example of this is if I'm independent. There's all these become independent, get your own piece of ground and grow your own garden and grow your own food and have your own power and have your own water, and then something good happens. I don't know what it is. It's good that happens. So you have all this sort of, not even survivalist. Survivalist is sort of the right-wing version of this, and sort of back to nature is often the, more liberal version of this. But it all amounts to the same thing. Get one or two people, maybe you and your kids, and build a walled fortress in which you provide your own food, your own water, your own everything. And then you'll be safe and your world will be good. No, this is nonsense. This is not good. What you want to do is make a strong community. You're not trying to wall people out or do everything for yourself, because this is just, again, the same problem, going to isolate you. But you see this concept all over the place. Trying to find that right scale in between those, very difficult, because our culture gives us basically no guidance there. In fact, it gives us negative guidance. You're not supposed to do that. If you have a small group of friends, some family members, and whatever your little group is, and you say, hey, I'm good with that. Well, people, you're provincial, you're limited, you're not out in the world, you're not thinking large enough, you're too narrow, you've got to think either bigger or smaller, right? They'll tell you both things. Oh, you should be out doing something in the world, and you should be taking care of yourself. Big abstraction, small, too narrow, too isolating. Because it's very much more complicated to try and negotiate that middle ground, or not even middle ground, because the abstractions are so huge. I would say is just slightly larger ground than the individual. And so that's what I'd really like to leave folks with, because this difficult challenge is to start thinking about, the 10 or 20 people that matter. How can you spend more time, organize more space, dedicate more of your own personal resources of attention and time and work and interest in supporting, helping, and getting feedback and all of this, because that, it turns out, is going right back. We need to be in our little monkey tribes. We need to be in a relatively small group, again, 10, 20, 100, that can give us feedback, and that we can give feedback to, that we can feel that we have a sense of efficacy in, and they can let us know. And if we don't have that, then we will not feel as healthy as we could be. But again, I just will emphasize this. This is an incredibly tricky thing to pull off, because the other monkeys have been raised with us, and they've also been told this is not what you're supposed to do. That you're not supposed to get a small group of monkeys together and just sort of hang out, even though there's so many examples of this being the fantasy of what we're supposed to like. If people have been watching the Marvel superhero movies, I've seen 1.5, but the immediate thing that jumped out at me is how much of those movies is just the Marvel superhero people either palling around or fighting with each other. So what they've done is they've created a sort of superficial structure of a superhero movies, but underneath this, they built this sense of, here's some people who have a strong sense of community and mission and belonging, about which they fight. Great, there's your answer. That's what people want. They don't want to be superheroes in the sense of, they can lift large objects or, travel fast, do whatever superhero things people do. I mean, that's sort of a 12-year-old fantasy, which is great when you're 12. But the real thing that I think attracts people to this is the community. Like, what I really want is to be hanging out with cool people doing cool things and getting all that positive feedback and fighting with them, which is, of course, part of the whole people project. And sort of having this roiling, fun, interesting dynamic with a small set of people, right? It can't be 500 superheroes. That's too many. One superhero, turns out that we don't like it as much. Right? The isolated, single, lonely superhero, pretty quickly they learned, Batman, no, we need a Robin. We've got one superhero. It'd be better if we had a league of Justice. Anyway, a group, right? And they all, I noticed they tend, both in my memory, the comic books and TV shows and movies, is they also tend to live together, which is weird, right? The League of Justice, they lived at the League. So it's like the Hotel of Justice. right? Why they couldn't afford places of their own, apparently. Being a superhero doesn't pay that well. But they could, they're always together. There's a group, this communalism, but not too big of a community. Not 5,000, not 500, 12, 15, 28. A very small, finite group. That sort of feedback, you can see the fantasy over and over and over again whenever Friends was on TV. There it is. Small group of friends, communal, feedback, shared history. Theoretically, nothing about the lives of the people on the Friends TV show was good, except for that they had friends, which is the title of the show. And it turned out that was unbelievably appealing and attractive to people, which is both very human and kind of sad, because you could feel the desperate need of people going, oh, I would love to be a member of, I don't know what the Marvel people are called. It's, I don't know. Do they have a name? Perhaps. Anyway, that group of superheroes. Or I would love to be in a group of friends like that. Or, just love to have this dream, this fantasy of being in these sorts of dynamic, small, self-reinforcing groups. And the answer, and you're right, it's true. This is not an inaccurate analysis. The next step, of course, is the much trickier one, is starting to think about how does one do that? And I'm not sure there's a clear answer. I certainly don't have anything prescriptive, but pondering that, thinking about that, making some efforts in that direction is certainly a necessary and perhaps helpful first step. But it's going to be ugly and complicated, because so much of our cultural training and tradition, it argues emphatically against doing precisely what it is that is absolutely necessary for us to be healthy. That's the frustrating part about it. It's like be all in you or all in some large abstraction, nothing in the middle ground. But it's in the middle ground, in that small tribe, elective tribe, small, chimpanzee setting, that we can actually find health and wealth and meaning and well-being. And outside of it just doesn't seem to be possible for us. So those are my concluding thoughts of identity. Thanks for wandering along with me on this long and somewhat rambling, because very difficult to pin down. There's a lot of philosophical concepts that are in here. Like I said, the whole field of phenomenology, basically, we've touched on. This is, one of the core issues that's at the center of Sartre and Simone de Beauvoir, what they're trying to struggle with. I mean, it's just endless. But I tried to not go too far down into the philosophical weeds on this one. I wanted to stay sort of more, is that top level? Maybe height isn't a very good metaphor here. I wanted to stay in a more general cultural sense and look at what might be palpable to us in our day-to-day existence, because I think that is where you want to try and begin conceptualizing this. And it's probably better to think about these issues philosophically after you've tried to wrestle with them with the people themselves. And then it might be illuminating. But I think the philosophy without the people wrestling is not as helpful. So anyway, thank you very much. And this concludes the Identity series.